Battle Through the Heavens, Grand World. Chapter 168 Shao Chenggu Palace. By the way, since the Fighting Key continent hasn't broken through to the Fighting Monarch in more than 20,000 years, how did you do it? Also, what's the reason why you didn't break through to the Fighting Monarch realm? Xiao Ling pouted. She suddenly looked at Xiao Yan curiously, her expression full of doubt. Ling don't ask anymore. Grandpa will naturally ask clearly about this kind of thing. Besides, it's not like knowing about this kind of thing is of any use to us. Furthermore, Brother Xiao Yan can break through the shackles and break through to the Fighting Monarch. Of course, he used an extraordinary method. Am I right? Without waiting for Xiao Yan to speak, Xiao Hao spoke with a stern voice. Then, he looked at Xiao Yan and said with a smile. Xiao Yan was startled for a moment. When he saw Xiao Hao's calm gaze, he gently smiled and nodded without saying anything. What is it? You are so petty. Xiao Ling lightly snorted and did not ask any more. After about half an incense stick of time, the three of them finally arrived outside this majestic and grand hall. Suddenly, a primitive key rushed towards Xiao Yan from the ancient era, causing him to be startled. His legs almost couldn't stand straight. Just as his mind was in a daze. His chest suddenly felt hot, followed by a faintly discernible key that quickly covered his entire body. The powerful key that came from the hall could no longer affect Xiao Yan. Xiao Hao and his sister were clearly familiar with this key. Immediately, their key sunk into their dantian. The Origin Monarch key crazily circulated within their bodies, using an ingenious force to neutralize the deterrence of the powerful key. Xiao Hao, who had regained his senses, had a flash in his eyes. He then looked at Xiao Yan, who was standing beside him. When he saw Xiao Yan, he instantly recovered from the shock. Not only was he shocked, he also looked at Xiao Yan with a serious expression. It seemed like this man from the Xiao clan who came from the lower realm had some abilities. Unlike what some of the elders in the family had said, the Fighting Monarch of lower realm hadn't reached the Monarch Emperor yet. They were all trash. After regaining his senses, Xiao Yan's eyes quickly swept across his chest. The feeling just now should be that the prestige power spell had woken up from its slumber. Thinking of this, although Xiao Yan was happy, more importantly, he had a headache. The prestige power spell had woken up. This meant that he didn't need to use his soul power to resist the suppression of the key. When the prestige power spell sensed this powerful suppression, it immediately became silent. Hong Long. But at the same time, it also meant that the bitter days of his soul would come. Enduring the intense pain that came from the depths of his soul, Xiao Yan looked around. The doors of the huge hall were tightly shut, although there were no guards around. With his extraordinary soul power, he could still faintly sense several long and imposing auras. These auras gave him the feeling that they were not inferior to Xiao Wang at all. As expected of one of the four major families in the star field. This formation is truly frightening. Xiao Yan was amazed by the Xiao clan's strength. This was only a part of what he had discovered by chance. He estimated that there were more of them that he hadn't discovered, but they were also stronger. The Great Elder is in the Supreme Purity Palace. Allow me to report to him. When they arrived outside the huge palace, Xiao Hao's expression immediately became solemn. He changed the way he addressed the deacon to the Great Elder. After that, he quickly walked to the main entrance of the palace and said respectfully, under the orders of the Great Elder, Xiao Hao and Xiao Ling have arrived here with the Fighting Monarch of lower realm. Not long after he finished speaking, the huge doors of the hall slowly opened. It was as if a heavenly gate that led to the ancient era had been opened. The deep and serene interior of the hall slowly appeared in front of them. Shua. After the door was completely opened, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the door. When Xiao Hao saw the person who had come, he hurriedly said respectfully, Xiao Hao greets the deacon. Xiao Yan looked up and saw that the person was actually a woman in black. The woman had silver hair, and her black clothes had a tall mouth. Most of her face was covered, and only her eyes were exposed. She looked indifferently at Xiao Yan, who was beside Xiao Ling, and slowly nodded. His cold voice was like ice that would never melt, and he said, Xiao Wang is talking about this little guy. The Great Elder had already said that he would let this little guy come in by himself. All of you can leave now. As he spoke, he turned around and walked towards the interior of the hall. When Xiao Hao saw this, he answered respectfully. After that, he gave Xiao Yan a look. Xiao Yan could clearly hear what the women said, so he immediately walked forward. This is the deacon of Xiao clan. He is very powerful and belongs to the strongest combat strength of Xiao clan. You have to pay attention to every word and action of his. Don't offend him. When he passed by Xiao Hao, the former's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Xiao Yan frowned when he heard this. He calmly nodded his head. He followed the silver-haired woman into the hall. After Xiao Yan entered, the door slowly closed. He cut off Xiao Hao and his sister's line of sight and shook his head. Xiao Hao nodded at Xiao Ling, and the two of them bowed respectfully to the surroundings of the hall. After that, they left the place. Xiao Yan walked into the deep and serene hall. It was incomparably spacious inside. Numerous black pillars with mysterious patterns were arranged in the hall. Numerous jade pearls were embedded in the dome of the hall. The light of the jade pearls sparkled, causing the entire hall to be in a quiet and bright environment. Xiao Yan followed the women and walked forward. He looked around curiously. The mysterious patterns carved on the black pillars intrigued him. Don't wander around. The formation in the hall is interconnected. One wrong step and you will die. The woman who was walking in front suddenly said coldly. There was no emotion in her voice. Xiao Yan couldn't help but shiver when he heard this. He hurriedly held his breath and concentrated. He followed the woman closely. There seemed to be a strange formation on the way. After a while, he walked down. The scenery around him didn't change at all. Xiao Yan became more and more shocked as he walked. Looking from the outside, this hall wasn't that big. After walking for half a day, it seemed like he had walked for dozens of miles. He had yet to reach the end. After walking for a while, a bronze ancient hall suddenly appeared in front of them. This palace looked like an ancient ferocious beast that was coiled on the ground. At a glance, it made one's soul tremble, but without that intimidating aura, it looked even more peaceful. When she was a few dozen meters away from ancient hall, the woman stopped in her tracks. When Xiao Yan saw this, he immediately stopped as well. Great Elder, Xiao Yan has arrived. The girl stood up straight and faced the ancient hall. Her voice was emotionless. Thank you for your hard work, Xiao Yan. You can come in by yourself. While the girl was talking to the ancient hall, Xiao Yan turned around and looked at her. The door of the great hall was only a few miles away from him. He was secretly shocked by what he saw. An old and peaceful voice suddenly came from the ancient hall. It was the voice of an old man, who suddenly called Xiao Yan's name. Xiao Yan was startled for a moment, then he looked at the ancient hall. After that, he lifted his leg and slowly walked forward. When he arrived at the entrance of the ancient hall, Xiao Yan stretched out his hand. Just as he was about to push open the bronze door, suddenly, mystic light flashed on the black pillars on both sides of the door. Two black beams of light rushed in front of Xiao Yan in an instant. The space that the black rays of light passed through trembled slightly, emitting a burning feeling. Xiao Yan's expression changed drastically when he sensed the power contained within the black light. It was already too late for him to dodge. He immediately moved his heart. The crimson gold flame had suddenly appeared and completely wrapped around his body. Kai! Black light flowed. The black light suddenly stopped a couple of inches away from Xiao Yan's body. After which, it slowly scattered. Before Xiao Yan could let out a sigh of relief, the bronze door of ancient hall had already slowly opened. Isn't it just a meeting? It's really tiring to create such a mysterious scene. After muttering to himself, the crimson gold flame trembled and also disappeared from the surface of his body. Xiao Yan tidied his clothes, took a deep breath, and walked in with large strides. Chapter end. Hi guys, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.